Justin, and I'd like to also thank everyone else on the call for joining us today. As Justin mentioned, I'm Sarah Stewart, and today we are going to talk about some exciting tools to help you quote cases much more accurately and efficiently. By the end of this webinar, I hope that you will quickly see that every person in your organization, regardless of their current underwriting expertise, can think like an underwriter and know the majority of questions that carriers would be interested in having answered for every major medical condition. A brief agenda here for what I'd like to cover today during our webinar. First off, I would like to discuss the importance of field underwriting and how this has become somewhat of a lost art form with agents today. Next, we will discuss the X-ray system and how it can help you with every case, regardless of underwriting difficulty or whether or not you feel there may be some issues down the road from an underwriting perspective. We'll then arrive at the main feature of today's webinar, which includes valuable information relating to the iPipeline quoting and X-ray integration within that tool. Lastly, we'll walk through some scenarios in the new system to demonstrate the ease of use, as well as all the information that's really valuable for the agents and how quickly that can be returned to you. At the end of the call, we'll answer any questions that have come up throughout the webinar. As a reminder, and as Justin said, the lines have been muted, so if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to type them in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will answer those questions at the end of the demonstration. So why is field underwriting so important? Unfortunately, field underwriting has become somewhat of a lost art in the past decade. With the arrival of virtually so many multi-carrier platforms such as iPipeline, VitalTerm, etc., agents are able to plug and chug client information, and in many situations solely are looking at the rate that is displayed, and they go with the cheapest carrier. Within the past 3 years, financial strength and company reputations have also become important factors in quoting as well. However, we're still seeing that agents have moved further away from field underwriting unless they know that their client has obvious health issues or have been rated or declined in the past. So they tend to push off some of this field underwriting and are just assuming best case scenarios. Perhaps with more and more agents becoming independent, it also doesn't make sense to memorize 20 field underwriting guidelines or to carry each brochure with you to each and every appointment. So that is certainly understandable. We understand why that field underwriting skill has been, again, somewhat of a lost art. Not to mention ensuring that you always have current updated copies for each and every carrier guideline is a huge burden to our agents. And we know, as well as you do, that each of those guidelines tend to change rather frequently, and it is difficult to keep up with each and every one of those. Unfortunately, going with what may appear to be the cheapest rate can be a costly mistake for both agents and their clients. As we all know, a carrier that may quote Standard Plus may be cheaper in some instances than a carrier that has a preferred rate for your applicant. So not only is it important to know which rate class that applicant would qualify for, we need to make sure that within that rate class that the pricing is ideally where your client would like to be. Similarly, your client's billed with carrier A may result in a standard, whereas with carrier B, she may be table 3. Using the cheapest rate from a spreadsheet is not going to ensure that your client is truly getting the best rate. So again, it's very important from a front end on the sales process to ensure that you're setting the correct expectation with your clients. If we're quoting preferred on every single applicant because we don't know of any major health issues, if we feel that the build may eke through and get preferred, unfortunately, when they come back Standard Plus or Standard, it's much more difficult for the agent to place those cases in the long run. So by setting this expectation correctly on the front end with your clients, you're not only able to retain your client's trust, but you're avoiding having to rewrite applications down the road. So I'm sure many agents have been in that embarrassing situation where they simply spreadsheeted it, went with the cheapest rate, but come to find out that carrier may not have been as aggressive in underwriting that applicant's particular ailment. And so they're having to rewrite the application down the road after we're 30 days into the process. So with these tools that we have, we're able to avoid having to rewrite those applications and writing it with the correct carrier day one. With that, you're also able to achieve much higher placement ratios because, again, we're not having to not take certain applications, and you're able to place it with the applicable carrier the first time around. And by doing that, the agent is able to retain their commissions. So what is X-Rate? This certainly isn't a new tool. Financial Brokerage has offered this free of charge to our agents for about 1.5 years. And many of you on the call may actually already have an account. And if you don't, you can simply sign up for one on our website. It's free of charge, again, to all of our agents. We're only going to briefly touch on the full X-Rate platform today. I will show a brief demo of that just for those of you that are not familiar with that platform. It's a very, very useful tool. Again, we're going to really focus on their partnership with the iPipeline quoting tool because it is a much more scaled down version, but it will show you how quickly and seamlessly we can wrap all this into one process. X-Rate has partnered with the majority of our carriers to perfectly underwrite a case as the carrier would underwrite it. Keep in mind that in order for it to be truly perfect, you would have to load every possible medical condition that that applicant has. However, the system does assume best case scenario. So if your applicant is a non-smoker, you don't have to go into the smoking details. It's going to assume best case scenario that they're a non-tobacco user. So how does it work? Again, X-Rate platform assumes the best case scenario for every applicant. So that would be preferred plus at every carrier level. However, by simply loading information about your client that could potentially lead to higher rates, you have access to the carrier's published as well as their proprietary underwriting guidelines, which is key in this process. So this really becomes valuable for behind-the-scenes actions that are taking place at the carriers in their underwriting departments. At this point in the webinar, I'm going to show you a quick overview of the X-Rate system before we get into the partnership with the iPipeline quoting tool. So from the Financial Brokerage website at www.fb-inc.com, you will go to this section on our website entitled Underwriting. Again, if you don't already have an account, that's not a problem at all. You can simply sign up for that on the website, and access is granted usually within an hour or two business hour. If you're not familiar with the X-Rate system, if it's a completely new process to you, there is a very helpful 4-minute demo out here. They also do have training every Tuesday. So if you're interested in that, certainly let us know and we can put you in contact with that registration. But I'm going to go ahead and log into the X-Rate system. Again, this is the full X-Rate platform. So what we'll be seeing here is a much more in-depth process. This is what I would recommend for those clients that have significant medical ailments, so not those with the 1 or 2 ailment type customers. The nice thing about this platform is you can actually store your clients within this system. So it will keep those out here indefinitely. If, say, 2 years from now you could not remember what particular ailments your clients had, you can log in here and you will see all the information that you had previously loaded. And that is why X-Rate does recommend that you put in the client's actual first name and last name and not just labeling everything John Doe. So you will want to put in their actual name just for your record-keeping purposes, not so much for anything the system will do. So I'm going to add a new applicant. As I mentioned, it's always going to assume best case scenario. So the only 2 required fields that you must fill out in the X-Rate platform are the date of birth and the gender. And that's simply because, as we know, a lot of the underwriting guidelines are based on age and sex. So you can simply answer each question as applicable. And once you're done with that, you simply click the record button, and that will store the answer. If you ever need to go back and edit that, you'll notice on the left-hand side there's a little pencil mark. You can click that pencil mark, and it'll allow you to edit that if in the instance that you have made a typo or if the information no longer applies. Again, the face amount is not required. Only those first 2 questions are. However, if you're looking for an immediate response and are wanting to get some pricing details, you obviously do need to have the term length, the face amount loaded in here. In this particular instance, I'm going to just assume the client's only impairment is their build. So we're going to say that they are 5'9", and they have a build of 295. You'll notice that once I answered the applicant's build, there's a follow-up question that builds. Now, it's not mandatory to answer this, but again, the more information you load, the more accurate this quote is going to be. So in this particular instance, it's asking if the applicant's chest measurements exceed their waist measurements. At this point, we'll just assume that the agent does not know this information, so we're going to go ahead and leave that blank. And after reading through all of this, we feel that the applicant is healthy in all these other areas. They're not traveling to any destinations that could potentially cause problems. So we're going to go ahead and search results. And you'll notice what it's doing on the left-hand side is it's going to give us the rate class for these carriers. And again, what you'll notice is that the proprietary information that may not be in your field underwriting guide is being generated in this quote. So for example, as we know in field underwriting guides, the substandard rate classes are not listed. So you may not have access to the build charts for substandard applicants, and you're just having to make a best case estimate. However, with the X-ray system, we are able to get those table ratings. So you'll notice Prudential is table 2 for this build, whereas ING is going to be table 6. So it's a rather dramatic difference. Now, assuming I want to, as we know, not all rate classes are equal in pricing along the various carriers. So in order to get pricing, you simply just need to load the state where the applicant's located. And we're going to go ahead and view pricing. So this may change what we feel would be the best situation for this applicant. And as you can see, West Coast actually ends up being the cheapest for this applicant at $962. What's interesting to note is that they are a table 3. American General is actually a table F, but they're the second most competitive, which is really interesting considering we have Prudential here at table 2, and they're the third most competitive. So you can't always assume that a lower or higher table rating is going to, that you want to rank those in order of table rating. You want to make sure you're also running the premium, and this really is important in this system. It can really show you how valuable the X-ray system is. Again, if you decide the applicant no longer wants a 20-year term, you can simply just change it over to 10-year, and it's going to convert all those rates for you. So it's very quick, very efficient, and if there's a certain carrier you don't like, you can simply take them out, add them back in, and we can change modal payments as well if you're interested in different modes. I'm going to go back to my answers and just want to demonstrate briefly. If this were a much more complex case, we're going to say that we know this applicant had a heart attack, we'll say here in the last year, stent placed, hospitalized. The more information you have, you can certainly load all of that subjective information into the case. However, you'll notice when we record that, whatever medical information you may add there, if we go back and go to our search results, we're going to get this warning from the X-ray system. What it's telling us is that it can go ahead and complete the quote based on all of the objective information that we've loaded. However, it's warning us that because of those notes that we loaded into the system, obviously X-ray cannot read free text. So it's telling us that it's going to be a best case scenario and that really we should be sending this to our agency, which is Financial Brokerage. So down here it says they send this quote to Financial Brokerage to have it individually considered. And what that's going to do is it's going to send the information here in our office to our in-house underwriting staff, and they're going to then send this out to the carriers to actually have a live person review this quote. So in these situations, I would always recommend that over here on the left-hand side, you select Send to Manager. Again, that's going to send that to our in-house contact to work. We're going to send them this quote for review. You can certainly type a message saying, please send to all carriers. I need this ASAP. And you'll notice it's sending then an email from myself to Andrea here in our office, and it allows you to select certain carriers. If there's only a handful that you want to send that to, because they'll be more competitive, you can just again click those boxes. And once you hit send, it's going to send this out to Andrea, who will then receive an email, and she can actually feed this out to those various carriers, and they will have, again, an underwriter in their office review this manually and let us know which rate class they feel would be most appropriate. So again, a lot of really helpful information here in the X-ray system. One item I'd like to also point out, if we go back to this, I know a lot of agents, and myself included, don't necessarily feel that they have the underwriting capacity to always know the correct questions to ask their applicants about certain ailments or whatever that may be. So within the X-ray system, I'm going to actually start a new quote. X-ray has some hidden features in here that are also very helpful. When you come across a word that is either bolded, as you can see here, we also have the word medications bolded. If we scroll down a little ways, you can see that travel warnings is bolded. Any of those items that are bolded within the X-ray system actually are hyperlinks, which can be very helpful. So for example, travel warnings. If you're not familiar with what the current countries are that have travel warnings as far as Americans traveling to and from, it'll take you right to the pages that have the information. So for example, if you, out of curiosity, need to know where current travel warnings are, it'll take you directly to the Department of State website. Again, if you aren't really sure what medications, if you're not sure of the spelling, it's going to link you over to the Medicine Plus website. It's got the national listing of medicine, and you can certainly search for any medication that's out there. If you're looking for a certain, for example, antibiotic, you can go to the antibiotic link. And that also is very helpful in ensuring that you get an accurate quote. So with that being said, again, I'm not going to go into much more detail on the X-ray system itself, but it does give you an idea of what is out there. So we're going to go back to our slides. So again, I mentioned that recently X-ray has quoted with iPipeline. iPipeline is the engine that drives our quoting. It's also where all the forms are downloaded from on our website. It's basically a multi-carrier platform that stores all the information for the carriers. So again, it kind of saves the agents from having to either go out to every individual carrier's website, downloading forms from the carriers, or calling our supply department to order those. So with this partnership that was formed here in the last month, they've actually integrated the platform for X-ray into the term quoting software. So, you know, a common complaint with the X-ray platform is I think people don't like to go in, log into that system. They feel there's a lot of questions out there, particularly for those applicants that may only have a single or dual impairment. So in the situations where you don't have a super complex situation, the integration now gives us the ability to not only quote our clients, but can include information about the top 6 ailments that we have seen in order to ensure the clients are given the most accurate quote. So keep in mind, if you do still have rather complex cases, we'd recommend that you use the full version of X-ray in order to load all those applicable details. However, the new integration can allow you to quickly quote and receive accurate rate classes for each carrier. And when you go to spreadsheet those, it'll actually split those out as well by the rate class that that particular carrier is dictating. So it's very seamless, it's very quick. You're not having to log into a separate system. Again, if you need to do that for your more complex cases, you can certainly do so, but it's very quick. So with that, I'm going to demonstrate the new integration. To locate that, you'll simply go to our website, and you'll see this Quotes tab on the top of the web page. You'll simply click on that, and you're going to want to click on the term quote. So this is our term quoting tool with iPipeline. You're probably all very familiar with that. And in the past, I'm going to start loading here our client's information, but in the past, you've had to manually select and dictate which rate class you're wanting to quote for your particular client. So I have a client here. You'll notice a lot of the old features are still here. This is what it has looked like in the past as far as the selecting of your rate class. So, You know, in this situation, we know our client's a little on the heavy side. They're 5'5", 265 pounds. And in the past, you may have felt, well, it's probably a substandard rating, but since I don't have access to that, I'll just quote a standard. Maybe throw in a standard plus just to see what comes back at me, and then, you know, potentially just warn the client that it could be a little more costly because of that. We could even throw in, I'll take off the standard plus, we could even throw in, say we know it might be around the table 2 range, and then we quote it. So in the past, what it would do is it would quote that rate class across all carriers. So here with the table 2, we'd be led to believe that American General is the cheapest, followed by ING, and then Transamerica. And what we would see agents doing is just simply pulling American General, and they'd download the forms, and they'd go ahead and write the applicant based on this information. But with this new integration, very exciting, it allows us to, it's going to help us determine our rate class. So by selecting that button versus the defaulted where you're manually selecting the rate class, we're going to get a pop-up here. And you'll notice it looks very similar to the X-ray screen that we saw before as far as just the fonts, the look and feel of everything. And you'll notice that the information I've already loaded into the quote has carried over. So we have the gender, we have the date of birth, and we have the face amount and the term product type. So as I mentioned, this integration has loaded the top 6 ailments that carriers have said are the most common that they see, particularly with the single impairment or the dual impairments. So those include the build, the tobacco usage, family history, blood pressure, cholesterol, and driving violations. So again, this obviously is not all-inclusive to the types of impairments that your clients may have. However, if you, again, just feel like they have a single impairment, if it's a build situation, rather than having to log back into the full-blown X-ray system and going through all of that, you can answer those here much more quickly. And again, this is going to be the same as the full X-ray system where it's going to assume best case scenario. You only have to load the information that's applicable and that could adversely impact your case. So again, this client is 5'5" and 265 pounds. So with that, she has no other health issues. She's a non-tobacco user. Again, we could certainly go through each of these and go to the next section. However, we know that that's her single impairment. Many agents prefer a case summary as far as what was inputted. So the last page is the case summary. You could certainly print this out and include that, you know, with the application once you submit that to Financial Brokerage. But again, that's just more of a summary to know what was included in case you forgot anything. So in this case, I'm going to click on the I'm finished return to quote. And you'll notice our page here is thinking. If we scroll back down, you'll notice that it says done, preview health class results. And then we do also have this section here that says view carriers not participating in the health class analyzer. And with X-ray, there are certain carriers that do not participate. So basically what that means is they have not given access to X-ray of all their proprietary underwriting information. So obviously those cannot be analyzed by this system. But as you'll notice, when we expand the done section as far as the rate classes go, X-ray has gone in and analyzed this particular applicant based on her build. And as you'll notice, we have Prudential leading the pack at Table B, West Coast, Table C, and so forth. There's going to be 2 at the bottom. You see Aviva and AXA that it was unable to determine a health class for. So again, that likely means that there's information missing from those carriers, so they're not able to spit out an accurate quote. If we expand this section as far as the viewing carriers not participating in the health class analyzer, I think you'll notice that the majority of the carriers in there either are in the process of getting set up with X-ray, so there's several of those that will soon be included up in the results above, or they're going to be carriers that, you know, it's going to be smaller carriers such as Foresters, American National, where you're probably not writing as much business with, or maybe they're not as competitive in the life market, whereas they may be in other areas. So if you do want those to show up in your quote results, you will have to go back and search manually by rate class and maybe just estimate it based off of this information. But again, I feel like there's a lot of carriers here. So in this situation, One thing I want to point out before we go to the next page and get our results, you know, in the past, if we look at this quickly, we're saying, oh, Prudential's Table B, they're going to be the cheapest, followed by West Coast at a Table C. But what you're going to notice when we get to the results page, when we go to View All Quotes, something very interesting here is going to occur. So if you remember, the page before, Prudential actually was the least table rated. So they're the Table B in the group here, followed by West Coast, who was a Table C, and then we had Banner and Mutual of Omaha with a Table E. So those were the top 4 competitors. However, when we look at the quotes, you'll notice that West Coast leads the pack at a Table C for this build, with their price only being $715. Prudential, they do have 2 term products, but their essential product, Table B, and that's at $730. So they're only slightly more expensive. However, the interesting thing to note, American General was a Table 6 or a Table F on the prior screen. However, they're the 3rd most competitive in this particular situation. So it's really important to note that you know, those pricing structures aren't always going to be logical when you get into the actual quote. So you don't want to just assume that the Table B is going to be the cheapest, because clearly it's not. So in this particular case, we'll imagine we want to just send the top 4 carriers to our client. So we're going to go ahead and check those. And as you've been able to do in the past, you can go in and print all the quotes and or email those to your applicant. If we open that up, you'll see that it is spreadsheeted as it has been in the past. But the nice thing is that it is only going to include the rate class that X-Ray determined for that particular carrier. So you're no longer having to deal with, you know, preferred plus across the board or standard across the board on a rate sheet. You're able to see that up at the top, it's including everywhere from standard Table 2 all the way to Table 6. And again, it's going to sort those in price order. So again, with our Table C being the cheapest, with West Coast, Table B with Pru, and then American General. So hopefully in looking at this information, you'll see that, you know, underwriting has gotten more and more complex, and with more and more carriers out there, it really is hard for agents to stay on top of it. So hopefully with these electronic tools, you'll feel confident that you can quote the right rate class to your applicant the first time around. So with that, we will open it up for any questions that anybody may have. I would also like to remind everybody while you're typing your questions that we do have some other useful underwriting tools available to you. We obviously have some in-house resources. If you're not familiar with Mike Nielsen here in our office, our in-house underwriter, and Andrea Rasser, who is the case management supervisor but is also an underwriting coordinator. They're available at any time for any help you may need. We do have an email box as well. It's quickquote@fb-inc.com. So if you have an email that's already typed up, you don't want to take the time to go load it into X-Ray, you can certainly email that box, and then we route that out to the carriers to get the best offers possible as well on those quick quotes. And one other thing I'd like to point out, on our website, under the underwriting section, we do have a link to the NELBA Field Underwriting Guide. And interestingly, X-Ray actually used the majority of this information in their design of the software. So this may or may not be something that's familiar to you, something you've seen in the past, but this is where we get a lot of our information when we need to know which questions to ask as far as, you know, if somebody had cancer, what is something that an underwriter is going to need to know. But there are, like I said, questionnaires out here, and they're very helpful to agents just to know, again, what questions to ask to your applicant. So obviously not all these questions are going to be on an application. This will not only help you sound, you know, much more informed about those ailments, but it'll just make sure you're getting all the correct information up front, and again, so you can pass along a realistic expectation to your client as far as rate class goes. Okay, so I'm going to open up the questions here. Again, type those in on the right-hand side if you do have a question. Okay, so the first question I have is, if the case is too complex, say there are too many issues or there's an obscure health issue, is it worth the time to use X-ray, or should we just go to Andrea and Mike right away? So that's a really good question. We have various agents that take different methods as far as how they handle this, but it really just depends on your preference. If you're comfortable with the X-ray system, I would say go ahead, just load it in there and send that off. The one reason I would recommend that versus just sending an email to the quick quote box or calling Andrea or Mike, we've been told that the carriers actually handle the X-ray quick quotes more quickly because they do come into them in an organized fashion. So as you saw in those X-ray screens, they have very specific questions, and when it gets shot over to the carriers, it's not that Andrea and Mike are going to retype that information. It actually feeds the data directly to those carriers and to those underwriters. So for example, it will come in with all the applicable information. It'll have the question and the answers below it, and it sounds as though it's much more clear for the underwriters at the carriers to read. Again, it's not just a mishmashed email. But if you do prefer to just go directly to Andrea or Mike, you can certainly do that. I will say that the quick quote box that we have here, that quick quote at fb-inc.com, when Andrea routes those out to the carriers, 90% of the time she actually is using the X-ray system. So she's having to go back in and reload all that data into X-ray if it wasn't sent through there initially. So again, she'll load that all in there and then get the responses back through the X-ray platform before she'll go back to the agent with the information. So hopefully that answers that question. But it's really a matter of personal preference. Some people may not be as comfortable online and feel like if their web page is slow, if they have a slower connection speed, certainly don't get frustrated trying to load those in there. You can certainly come to us immediately. And it appears that there are no other questions at this time. So I'd like to thank all the webinar participants that attended today. And if you have any questions concerning this webinar, you can certainly contact myself or your sales manager here at Financial Brokerage. Our phone number is 1-800-397-9999. And we look forward to you hopefully joining us for our eSummit here in October. It's coming up right around the corner. And we do have another webinar tomorrow about bringing your business online. If you haven't already signed up for that, you're certainly more than welcome to do so at this time. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to give us a call here. Otherwise, we look forward to speaking to you soon, and we hope you have a productive day. Thank you.